This afternoon we've got Tennessee Leeuwenburg from the Bureau of Meteorology basically trying to show us, tell us how to actually get your devs to develop secure software when you don't actually have support for it. Just as a reminder, make sure your phones are on silent or off, and use the AusCERT app to actually rate the speakers in the session so that we've got feedback for future years. Anyway, please welcome Tennessee.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, this is me. This is my talk title. I'm on Twitter. Go for it. It's fair game. And I've got a background as a software developer. And one of the things that I've definitely run across is try to build support in an organisation, team, or other context for getting security into that software life cycle. So these are some of my worst slides, but some of my best content. So I was editing right up till the last minute because I poured all of my thoughts in, but I didn't format them beautifully. If I could send the information back, I would send this presentation and the lotto numbers. Okay, so I don't have all the answers. Those of you who've worked with me will definitely know that's true. Now all the rest of you also know it. Nothing is easy and only some things work out, but I have opinions and here we are. Disclaimer, I'm not here to represent my employer, anyone else's employer, any formal organisation or anything other than just my collection of thoughts. It's about people and it's about us here in this room, so about me. So I was a junior developer, then I was a developer, then I was more developing, and then I got distracted by machine learning, but I still had a day job as a developer, and then suddenly a sharp turn to the right and I went into a supercomputing team, and then I equally sharp turn to the left into secure coding, and now I'm currently doing cybersecurity engineering at the Weather Bureau. Okay, so the science is in for how to do this. Exercise and eat healthily. Wait, no, sorry. Actually fix problems and patch regularly. Sorry, it's very similar concepts. So why might some of us not actually fix problems or actually patch regularly? Or, for that matter, why might we not all exercise and eat healthily, given that it's obviously the answer? Also, you should do CI/CD, Sec DevOps, and Agile, but saying that can make people angry. So let's talk about achievements. What does success look like in securing the software lifecycle? Let me talk about just some people who I've seen around the place, here, there, and everywhere, who've gone out and achieved something in an organisation. I'm like, yeah, you really went and you made some kind of difference. You made a dent in the universe. So one of the people out here built the CTF, and they did it themselves. They went, oh, I think I might quite like to do that. And they went out and they bought several train kits and they glued the whole thing together and they stayed up late at night and they just went out and do it. And I'm willing to bet that that's not because their boss said, hey, have I got a job for you? It's because they did it themselves. Saw someone go take a legacy application that had absolutely no test coverage and force the organisation, every developer, all of the people around the developers, the project manager and everyone else on the project to go incur a 3-month delay and get that thing up to 80% test coverage. I've actually seen it done. I still don't really know how he pulled it off. Establishing a new team, section or group, I've definitely seen that occur. That's a major achievement. Getting a new job or a role or a responsibility. Actually convincing another human of anything at all that they didn't already believe in is frankly quite tough. So how did these people both decide to do it and achieve it? Okay, so let's think now about ourselves. What's something you've achieved? Perhaps not on that scale, but kind of anything at all. Maybe it was having kids, getting married, maybe you fixed a software bug, something like that. Was it because your boss added it to your KPIs, or because somebody else said, you know, you've got to do this? Or actually, did you just decide for yourself? I'm willing to bet is because you decided for yourself. That may have happened after your boss gave you the KPIs. It might have happened after somebody said, you know, I'd really like you to take this on. But I think it will have been your decision making. And now the rest of this talk is really just footnotes. So once you've realised that basic fact about why people do anything at all, which is because they want to, everything else really just follows from how you lay that path down in front of those other people, and you recognise that that's the problem of getting support into software development or anything at all. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. I was a developer, I had a goal, and I'd go out and I would climb that mountain and I would build that feature set, and it was sunny and it was good and I liked it. And then somebody said, Tennessee, you should probably Google something about software security. I've heard it's important. And I did. And I've never been able to unsee software security ever since. And that's what I felt like after that person walked past my desk and said, you should probably have a think about software security. So I'm not easily kind of intimidated by complex tasks, so I went back into my mind palace and went into the cave, and I sat down and I worked out all of the forks in the road and all of the things, and I went, you know what, I reckon I could fix software security. Okay, all we need is all of this. That's it, you just need everything on that list. It shouldn't be that hard, it'll only take, a complete organisational transformation, but it's obviously the right thing to do, so it should be easy. Then I spoke to all my colleagues, and I think they thought I was just talking like this. It just didn't make sense. It wasn't affordable, it wasn't doable, it wasn't easy, no one was asking them to do it, they didn't know. So, but still, actually, we do need all of this, right? This is actually what you need, but you don't get it by knowing what you need. So I went home and I thought to myself, everyone else just seems to have gone away. They still want the outcome, but they don't want my list. What's going on? So I'm like, okay, I guess it really is something about people. And it's about buy-in, and it's about that question of how you decide to commit to something yourself. How do you get a group of people to work together and go, yeah, this is my job, this is great, I am going to do my part? How do you convince another human of basically anything? Okay, so, and I don't mean coercion or resorting to stupidity. When you think about other people's motivations, it's easy to become quite cynical, but really what you need to start to understand is diversity. You need to start understanding just how different everybody is, and you have to embrace diversity. That's not to say it always helps. Embracing diversity does not directly lead to the answer. It just lets you understand the next problem, which is starting to see the individuality in everybody that you have to work with and bring along that journey. So your life just gets a little bit more difficult. I didn't say any of this was going to be easy, by the way. This is a presentation on stuff that's actually really difficult, and I completely understand if you go, maybe I won't. So big things, however, are little things just stuck together. It's true in physics, it's true in life, it's true of money, it's true of organisations. So don't worry about the scale of your problem too much. Just concentrate on the little things and sticking them together. Maybe explain to some other people about why you should stick some of those little things together. And if you can't convince people of the need for all of the big list, and you're still motivated to keep trying, just keep sticking little bits together. It'll be okay. And if you do it long enough and hard enough and some people join you, then eventually you'll build a big thing. So you've got to identify early wins. You've got to get those things done. And you've got to amplify your results. You've got to build awareness, familiarity, and motivation. Give some people something they can do. Don't give them the entire elephant. Give them a small decision. Don't worry if that decision's not going to get you personally to your answer or even your organisation closer to that answer. Concentrate on the fact it's going to bring that person to a greater sense of confidence in being able to approach the problems their way. So it may directly contribute to your technical strategy, but it's much more likely to bring people on board as part of your people strategy. Give people reasons they can easily understand, even if they don't understand the full picture. And accept change is hard and slow. So here's some examples of actionable things. None of these are going to by themselves fix software security, but they're actually not very hard. Add security criteria to job advertisements for developers. Hands up in your organisation. I actually have no idea how widespread this is. If your organisation is hiring a dev and you know the answer to this, hands up if anywhere in the selection criteria or a job description is knowledge of secure coding. Right, bang. Okay, so straight away, that's an incredibly achievable thing. You don't even have to ask your selection committees to care. All you actually have to, and of course they care. I keep using the word don't care when I mean don't prioritise. The important thing is not to try to drive a deep and abiding passion for software security into every human everywhere. It's to make people think and reflect. Just take the smallest possible action and worry about the larger consequences later. Chase up resolution of security issues with dev teams. Keep reminding them that it's important and that they need to think about it. Send people outside your bubble to security conferences and events. Actually get people who are not in your orbit into your orbit. And then there's some other things, but they're on the slide and I don't have enough time to go through the reasons for each of them. So examples of actionable things that we can do. So the boundaries of your organisation are really just a figment of the modern capitalist and legal framework in which we happen to live. There is very little stopping us actually engaging with the other humans in this room, regardless of our employer. I say regardless, you know, like asterisk, asterisk, yes, sometimes it can matter. But by and large, there is very little stopping us from being a community of practice and coming together at conferences, events, and all sorts of other places to actually learn from each other. And it's not just about learning. There's a network effect and a popularity effect and an importance effect and a perception effect that we could in fact all choose to do. If I pick, I don't know, that person and say, how about all of us email their director tomorrow of their company and say, hey, I met this guy at a conference, he's amazing, you should do what he said. What would happen next? I don't know. I imagine the director would notice if he got 30 emails, and I imagine that person would get a phone call about it. So if we wanted to, and we chose to act collectively, we could achieve great things if we wanted to. That specific course of action is not recommended, but something similar but slightly less dramatic is recommended. Invite people from outside your organisation in. A halo effect from people outside your organisation is very well known. So find somebody who thinks exactly what you think and invite them to come and speak, and they will just, you know, and then build support for that perspective. Perhaps also invite someone who doesn't think exactly what you think and get a range of views. But if you can start to demonstrate that your knowledge isn't just in your head, coming out of what you happen to think, but actually reflects a considered view from a range of different people and perspectives, it's very likely to get more support. Also, simple human memory and messaging is very effective. One of the tenets of accepting facts in media is make sure you've got 3 separate sources. Why? Because by the time you've got enough sources, you're far more likely to accept that statement as factually correct. So if you're going to take that same view, there's advantages, there's repetition advantages, and there's independent observations building a greater consensus position advantages. Send an email to a colleague's boss. Find a developer. It doesn't really matter if they're very good at the job. Say they're very good at the job. Ideally, they would be very good at the job, but my point is it's not about whether they're very good at the job. It's about getting engagement and buy-in. It's about saying, hey, this person's really fantastic. They did a really good job at, pick something they did a really good job at. You'll be able to find something, people are awesome. And then just say, they'd really benefit from this conference about what you happen to care about. They could go benefit and bring that back to the team. This person is going to love you as a result, and you might be able to build some support indirectly. Imagine if you got that email or your boss got that email, that would be a positive act. So it's quite possible to take these internal small steps to actually build support in small ways. Okay, so back to the boring version. How does all of that relate to what you actually need? So you may find your list varies. Everybody's very interested in the list of what we actually need. Yes, this is my opinion of the list of what we actually need. But it's just not going to win hearts and minds. No one's going to care unless they already understand these particular things and their benefits. The way people care is because all of the other things that you're solving around the people problem. So I will go into some specific groups. So how do you convince developers? First of all, what happened to me? Show them things that cannot be unseen. Just send them the right YouTube videos and the right content, and sheer personal motivation will convince at least some of them to take it more seriously. Have a quiet chat to them about professional responsibilities. So who expects a software developer in this room, by and large, to take like a professionalized level of responsibility? If I hire an architect, the spaces in my house should be right. If I take my car to the mechanic, you know, my car should be serviced correctly. If I hire a lawyer, they're liable for the legal advice. Is a software developer, forget legal, because that's clearly not the case. Are they actually liable for the security of the software that they build, you know, at face value? Hands up anyone who thinks, yeah, that's exactly what they should be responsible for. I'd like to think that. You'd like to think that. Wrong. Okay, so that is in fact not true and is a common misconception, and a great deal of people would like it to be the case, but it's not actually a valid assumption. So certainly it's not a valid assumption for anyone around about my age, plus maybe 5 years younger. It does seem to be changing at the moment. When I went to university, there were no software security courses. I did computer science and nobody ever said anything about software security. Back in the first year, maybe someone said something about dodgy SQL statements, but like that was it. An organization paid me and they said, climb the mountain, and I climbed the mountain. And it's not in university. There's no professionalized accreditation that requires it. It wasn't a condition of employment that I uphold those things. It wasn't in my duty statement. It's not in anyone's duty statement that I know of. It's actually it's not treated as a core expectation. It's treated as something your manager needs to tell you to do, otherwise please don't bother. So when you hire a software developer, first up, just change your tapes around what's incentivizing them at work and what kind of people are applying. They're good people. I don't mean kind of people in a pejorative sense, but they're people who want to build functionality. And what you're asking them to do, unless they've seen what can't be unseen, is build functionality and capability. And they will just expect the computer to do it properly, right? I'm using the libraries, I'm using the language. What do you mean it's insecure? Isn't that the operating system vendor's problem? I don't know. So I'm not trying to berate all of those wonderfully positive people who just said, yes, I expect people to build software securely. I'm just trying to give an overly long explanation to something that's commonly misunderstood about whether or not to expect secure software coming out of a software development team. Now, this will vary widely by age, area of development. If you're building something internet facing, which most people are, it's very likely to be a priority for the team in some form, but don't expect it to be a universal piece of knowledge or just come with the job title, I guess is all I'm trying to say.
If I can inject a question there, I was basically saying, based on your language chosen, professional responsibility, which should indicate that they should be ongoing learning new techniques, materials, understanding what the current state of play is, and improving their own knowledge around how to actually build fully functional software, which means software that can't be compromised.
Yes, very much so. So how to enable developers is how I've included some of that kind of content. So buy them time or budget, whatever it is that they don't have that they would need in order to actually put some time into this. Get their managers on board so that you've built it into whatever incentive system or project management life cycle it is that they happen to live under. Give them skills, technical skills, professional skills, and people skills. People often talk about soft skills, but A, I hate the term, and B, it doesn't actually tell you what it is that you need to learn. If I just said, like, go learn soft skills, I don't think it's very useful. But actually, people skills and professional skills will tell people, like, professional skills, okay, I should be able to write an email, write a good document, write a report, run a meeting, make sure I attend to my deadlines, function in an organization. People skills, I should be able to, if software is insecure or has problems, I may choose to say, it could possibly benefit from further security testing instead of it's horribly insecure. But I would actually be able to say to someone who said, is this software secure? I'd be able to answer them factually, even if I use the right words to do so. Give them CI/CD with security automation. That's a real technical enabler. Any technical enabler, really, but that was my primary example. And just help them with whatever monkey's on their back. For anyone not from my particular cultural background, having a monkey on your back is a euphemism of you want to do something, but you can't because there's a monkey on your back and you have to get that off first. So a lot of teams will be faced with various monkeys on their back, and yeah, you should be able to just go in and say, please fix your security problems, but that doesn't make their life any easier. They've still got a monkey on their back. So you need to start understanding, if you really want to, yes, you should be able to say just do it, but if that doesn't work, feel free to try it a few times and then you'll understand, that it's not going to work. Help them help understand what monkeys they've got on their back. Okay, how to convince managers, right? The number one thing is just sound like you're across everything, right? Just sound like you've got it nailed, preferably by actually knowing everything and actually having it nailed. But if you don't, still sound like you're across everything. Work out how to say, I'll take that under advisement in a way that sounds like, I've thought about it, but I really want to give you a thorough answer, rather than I'm hopelessly lost. So one of the good ways is to know the names of everybody involved. I struggle a lot with names, but actually most of your managers are not going to know, they're going to know the names of the people a lot more than they're going to know what anything actually does or why it does it or how it's strung together. So one of the easiest ways to convince a manager that you are in fact across everything is to know the name of everybody directly involved and then be able to talk to your manager and say, yeah, I've talked to so-and-so. Right. Have key facts at your disposal and keep them simple. Know how many security and vulnerabilities are in your system. And I don't mean like keep a real-time app that like monitors every build. I just mean, yeah, last week on Thursday there were 23 critical vulns in the test system. Okay, just know some facts so that you can rattle them out at a moment's notice. Talk about reduced costs from improved relationships. Don't attempt to do anything about it other than improve the relationships, but talk about it. Say that you are brokering relationships or getting security on board, etc., etc. Don't really focus on the costs or what's involved in these things. Just make it clear that you've looked at, like, today, you know the people, and you know what's next. Okay. Managers will generally be much more interested in proven vulnerability, like actual exploits you can actually get in and break things. Like there are so many vulnerabilities just kind of everywhere, particularly in systems under development, etc., that like people just suffer from, there's just too much noise and you've got to cut through it. So something that cuts through is an actual, yeah, I got in kind of statement. To enable them, don't leave them apologizing in a meeting full of their peers, don't leave them ignorant, and try to never be wrong. It's much better to say far fewer things but completely correctly than it is to say a lot of things. Or preface and fudge the saying a lot of things. Say like, well, I don't know every particular fact about the following statements, but my impression is blah. It'll kind of annoy them, but it means that they're not going to go into a meeting and then have your perspective be opposed by someone else in that meeting and be unable to then assess whether or not you know your limits. So some of the key facts are basically the manager's going to be in some meeting you don't know about, you didn't see coming, it's going to be incredibly important. Someone who's out there jockeying for their job or their budget, or in some context that has nothing to do with what you're trying to achieve, is going to take them to task on something, and if you've let them be wrong, they're going to lose that political fight regardless of what it has to do with you. So make sure that they've got a small, crisp set of genuine facts that are unopposably correct that they can just kind of fall back on in those forums. Don't talk about how long it takes or how much effort is involved. As far as I can tell, that just generally turns people off. Get them to the point where they care about your problem, and then they will start trying to understand those questions for themselves. And then when that happens and they're coming to you, go for it. Okay. Then you'll always be faced with resistance. So you're going to have to be ready to make some noise. And there's two ways. There's making noise and there's persistence. You've either got to be loud or you've got to be a weed. If you want to be loud, reporting. Get in there, talk about it all the time, be across everything. In every meeting, just make sure you got facts and just say it. Don't necessarily really bother people, but just always look like you're really interested in what's trying to be achieved. Or be a weed. Get in there. Find the person in your development team that actually cares and keep distracting them with these problems. Make sure that you're in there and everybody knows that if they look the other way, you're going to be in there and you're going to notice and you're going to figure it out and you're going to tell someone about it, and then you're going to email them, and then you're going to email them tomorrow, and then you're going to email them the day after that, and then you're going to check in a week, and they're just not going to get away with anything, right? I don't mean be super annoying. You know, there's a fine line here, but I do mean be exactly the right amount of persistent. Make them go, because they'll just forget you the first 2 or 3 times, right? Like these are people who probably struggle to remember your name, okay? So make sure that you've got to build that reinforcement in with them. And it goes back to being right about things. Go, I fixed 4 vulnerabilities. Yeah, sure, I found them with static analysis and it was a one-line fix for all 4 at once. But I did it. Do you remember that I did that? Well, I found another 4. And you know what? I fixed them too. And you know what? Your team's found another 4 and I told them how to fix those 4 and I told them how to fix those 4 and I've helped them fix these 3 and Kevin in the lead development position is really beginning to get it and I think he's great. You should send him on a software conference. And by the way, this is really important and it's part of your KPIs now. So make sure to understand the nature of your own persistence in influencing the people around you. It's not always going to succeed. I fail as often as I succeed. But if you really want to make a difference, really you've got to make some noise and really you've got to be persistent. You've got to get good at making noise that isn't going to absolutely just turn people off. So there's a definite judgment and risk balance in how much noise and how persistent you are, but they're basically the techniques. So bringing that into a professional context, you know, this is kind of the list. Feel free to take more photos of lists. This is basically what you need to figure out for reporting. So you need to understand how your organisation tracks risks, basic metrics and frameworks. So don't try to just completely invent your own framework if you don't have to. Go find whatever your organisation already uses and try to leverage that. People will already be making, if you can get invited as a fly on the wall to the right meetings, like decisions in organisations about risk are made regularly, and so are budget decisions. If you can start to see who's making them, you've got to go back and you've got to see this whole thing as a network of decision making. All the if statements are people making judgment calls, right? All of the logic in the organisation is already there. You've got to figure out who's the if statement and what's their decision criteria, and then apply your 2 techniques to those people. Get good at all of these things. Okay, so conclusions, focus on what you can do, what you can't. That's a general life skill. You'll just kind of go mad if you focus too much on what you can't control. Look, that's true when I simply consider my laundry. You know, I just need to focus on what laundry I can do today. And yes, it's good to have a plan for the future that has a realistic and achievable goal in it. But the focus has to be on what you can do, on actually getting it done. Make sure you get it over the line in every possible way. Don't just do your bit and go, I did my bit. Work out what's going to stop you getting from A all the way to a conclusion. No matter how small that piece of work is, make sure it gets all the way done. The number of things that get mostly done and then it takes either just as long again to get all the way done or get rolled back is enormous. Your ability to make an impact is going to be much more influenced by getting things all the way done, even if you have a much tighter focus. People will come up with their own solutions if they're motivated and enabled. This was a particular challenge for me to deal with. When I was a developer, I was one of my old bosses, they called me a solutioneer, right? Like I would show up and I would like figure the whole thing out and I'd say, right, this is what we should do. I figured it out. And that was a function of 2 things. One is just how my own brain works. And the other thing was my own frustrations with the people around me. I've always wanted a solutioneer for a boss, right? I've always wanted someone who I really trusted to have figured things out. So this is what I tried to do as soon as I got in any kind of leadership role. But where I fell over is that that's what motivated me, and it's not what motivated everybody else. And so if you focus on the people in the equation, like yes, you need to be technically across your stuff. Yes, you need to be able to explain to them in simple terms exactly what the problem is, etc., etc. But your goal is not your solution or even your path. Your goal is influencing that individual again and again and again and again for different people along the way. Big things are just little things put together. So's support, so's teamwork, so's a positive atmosphere, So that's why some people just seem to be able to succeed. Like sometimes these things are just a sign of their times. The atmosphere is right, someone's tapped into the fact that there's a collective mood for action and they're in the right place at the right time. Sometimes you can cause it to occur and sometimes it'll happen to you. It's hard to say, but big things are definitely just little things put together. Okay, so that's, I think, all of the content that I have prepared for you today. I appear to have 10 minutes left, which is shocking for having so many slides. So I think we can have a little Q&A.
Well, I'm going to ask one first. I want your dream job, which, where was it? Somewhere here. Basically win the lotto and be able to work on moonshot projects.
Yeah, I would like my dream job.
So you talked about how to actually get all of this enabled and actually functioning without support from the organisation. Yet your job title is Head of Secure Coding.
Yes, that is accurate.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so that is to some degree the outcome of having done all of these things potentially with... So when I say without support, my organisation has supported me. But the ability to make an influence wasn't because of the support. So there are two characterizations I'll give to that. One is that these techniques don't change with your level of authority, nor do the fact that you're going to have challenges change with your level of authority. So building support is going to have to happen regardless of your level of formal authority. And you will have opposition regardless of your level of formal authority, including all the way to the top of your organisation. So to some degree, it in fact can get more competitive. I would say more, not necessarily, but it's just as competitive. There's just as much opposition between jockeying for budgets and ideas and objectives at the top as there is at the bottom. So being able to build support is kind of independent of where you are, and it's very unlikely that you are going to get universal support. So the act of needing to build support, it's just a universal constant. There are not organisations that support you and organisations that you don't. There are collections of people. Yes, some of them might be in a more fortuitous or less fortuitous state at any point in time. You're still just going to have to go do this. So the fact that whether support is there or not, it's a bit of a distraction. It's kind of my little funny tongue-in-cheek joke in the title, if you will. You've got to build support regardless of where you are. If you need to make a change, almost by definition, there's going to be a lot of convincing of people. So yes, my position is now head of cybersecurity engineering. So it was head of secure coding, but quite recently, like after submitting my abstract, but before coming to AusCERT, I changed into cybersecurity engineering, but I didn't update the abstract because it just didn't happen. So largely that's because of a number of things. One is, in my context, they wanted someone with that development background who could focus on the engineering side of things, but also it's because of being able to glue together some of these different kinds of concern and objective and sort of see some of that broader picture. But it's not because of like great unbridled ability, or it's certainly not because of that. It's just because of a willingness to be stubborn and persistent, I think, mostly. So you're a weed? I'm a weed, yes. I'm definitely a weed.
Paraphrase some of that. You'd basically say, regardless of organisational support, regardless of structural support, everybody who has an interest in this needs to basically be persistent, peer-level management, manage up the line, manage down the line, and basically push push the secure coding methodology and frameworks and message at every point you possibly can.
As a recent taking charge of an IT security team in an organisation, and luckily working alongside the person I'm replacing for a while on a gradual handover, and seeing the gross inability of enforcement type approaches with IT staff and developers and general IT staff, and getting them to do things safely and secure way. Basically, you can't mandate anything with them. I'm just wondering, you really had some good strategies there, but is there any hidden key or something that you appealed to in that mindset of the IT technical person, or is it just you've got to wrangle your way in and make friends with them so that you can get change and they can be doing things in a more secure way?
So it's a good question. So there's a few angles. Okay, so one is the people angle. People, including technical people, are not the same. There's as much diversity among technical people as any other people. So their individual motivations are going to be just as diverse as any other group. They'll have some things in common, but ultimately you're really going to get to know the specific people and go one by one, really. Eventually, if something becomes part of the culture or part of the general way things are done, the people will end up following and adopting that culture because that's what people do. But until you've got that point, it's really not the people's fault. It's just how cultural change works. It can be very frustrating, but being frustrating doesn't actually mean it's bad. It just means it's how groups of people work. So in terms of whether there is anything specific about how technical people approach problems, certainly as a developer, I was very interested in shifting the effort onto an automated backbone. So there are various technical things which can better enable people to adopt those processes. Continuous integration is one of them. If your development team doesn't want to adopt it, so long as you can get read access to the repo, you can just do it for yourself. So there's very little stopping you from saying, all right, we're just going to run a security audit once every 3 months, and you just email them the results of your CI/CD once every 3 months with all of the boring stuff chopped out, right? Like, it sounds like it's actually not very hard to achieve. It's quite doable, and they'll eventually get sick of your reports and say, look, can you tell me how you're able to generate these reports so frequently with so little apparent effort? And there's a way to build on that. I don't really know because I can't comment on your specific organisation, but that's generally what I've observed. Is that helpful?
So apart from socialising all of this type of change, getting security out there as a message and starting to get people at least thinking about secure coding as they work on the projects they're working on, what nuts and bolts things would you actually try and start to implement, or at least get them to think about implementing themselves as the first steps in terms of actually getting a development team or development practice to help themselves bootstrap into secure coding practices.
Is anyone here in a development team? 2 people, 3, all right. What do you think you need the most to take one step forward? Time? Time?
What about standards and some direction with respect to in your life? Hopefully, it sounds to me like a lot of these places don't have life cycles with respect to software development. They do not have architecture. It seems to be a bit sort of like
Right. Yeah. So that's a great question. I'll repeat what I took away from it for the benefit of the microphone and bash it as well. So I think if I take that away as standards, life cycles, common approaches, there seems to be a lack of some of these things. So I talk to a lot of people at conferences. This is not about my organisation. My organisation doesn't have one set dedicated way. Most organisations don't. Most teams don't. So there are many. The problem is not there are no standards. There are many standards, and they're generally some organisations who are very conscious may impose these, but they've generally not been found to directly lead to results. I would generally put them in that category of like things that might be part of your technical strategy but aren't going to help you very much with your people strategy. The overlap is where you can give people like a cut down a standard, like do these 5 things and then you'll be all right, and this is what we're going to expect of you for this particular period of time, like make sure you deal with all the serious vulnerabilities in static analysis, do threat modeling once a year, like just sort of simple things that everyone can wrap their heads around, become familiar with, internalize, bake into the culture, and then move on. Things like saying, could you please adopt the entire multi-100-page ISM, or build every system completely compliant to the NIST framework, like that kind of standards. I'm sure there's a time and a place for them, but they're not going to be what gets anybody in the dev team out of bed in the morning. Again, I'm sure asterisk depends where you work, but like by and large, it may assist you with your technical strategy, but it's going to be more of an objective than something that'll help you with your people strategy.
They're more about CMM level 4 and 5 rather than going from 0 to 1 to 2.
That's right. And by and large, most people are looking at going 0, 1, 2 rather than 4 and 5.
Great. We're pretty much on time now, so if everyone can please thank Tennessee for a great and thought-provoking talk.